The sun had barely kissed the horizon when the night was shattered by a deafening explosion. The distant village of Allura was usually a quiet, almost forgotten place at the edge of the world. Its winding paths, narrow and old, were lined with homes that had stood still for decades, their roofs weathered and the ground beneath them a patchwork of worn mud. But tonight, something different, something unexpected had come. Amara felt it first. The sudden rush of adrenaline, the hair-raising urgency that filled the air when an explosion echoed through the quiet, as though the world had just split in two. She didn't think. She only moved, her heart pounding fiercely against her chest as she ran toward the sounds of destruction. She had nothing to her name, no family, no future, just the weight of a life already defined by the harshness of abandonment and isolation. And yet, in that moment, the very act of running felt like a defiance against the invisible chains that had bound her. She had been discarded by the world, but tonight she would matter. Her worn sandals kicked up dirt as she hurried down the path, the thick scent of earth mixing with the acrid smell of burning metal. The SUV was crushed against the base of an ancient tree, smoke swirling from the hood like the remnants of a ghostly fire. Through the shattered windows, she could barely make out the body slumped in the driver's seat. A man, bloodied, unconscious, and helpless. A billionaire. She couldn't tell who he was, but the cold gleam of his expensive suit and the watch that glittered on his wrist told her he was no ordinary man. The flames were licking at the car's edges, and time was running out. She didn't stop to question her instincts. Without hesitation, she grabbed the rusted knife from her bag and shattered the window, the sound sharp and urgent. The heat hit her like a wave, but she pushed forward, quickly unbuckling the seatbelt with shaking hands. The fire was growing faster now, roaring behind her like an angry beast, but Amara didn't pause. She pulled the stranger from the wreckage, his heavy body falling against her frail frame, his weight almost more than she could bear. But still, she dragged him, pushing through the pain, through the stifling air, through the sudden flood of panic that threatened to drown her. She stumbled toward her humble home, breath coming in ragged gasps as she clutched the unconscious man to her chest. His skin was cool, despite the heat of the fire, and as she laid him down on a mat inside her hut, she saw the delicate features of his face, handsome, even in his bloodied state. But his pulse was faint, and that was all that mattered now. She could feel the weight of what she had just done, the gravity of this moment pressing down on her shoulders like an invisible weight. She had saved him, and as she knelt beside him, wiping the blood from his brow and tending to his wounds with the herbs she knew so well, something shifted within her. In his fragile state, his helplessness, there was something more than just survival. It was a chance to be seen, a chance for Amara to finally matter. The hours seemed to stretch on endlessly as Amara worked tirelessly, her hands moving with a grace she didn't realize she still possessed. She had cared for many in the past, always in silence, always unnoticed. But this time, something felt different. The man before her, Alyawazian, was no stranger to luxury, and yet here he was, stripped of all that wealth, vulnerable and broken on her small woven mat. His life, so easily torn apart in an instant, was now in her hands. She had always been the one to care for others, to shoulder their burdens without ever asking for anything in return. But this, saving him, pulling him from the jaws of death, was not a simple act of mercy. It was an acknowledgement, a claim on something she had long forgotten. The right to care for herself, to demand that someone see her, even if only in the quiet of the night as she wiped the blood from his face. As she sat beside him, dipping the cloth in water, she couldn't help but notice the way his features softened as the fever took hold of him. His lips parted slightly, and his chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Alyawazian, a name she hadn't yet fully understood, but one that now lingered in the air, in the space between them. The tension, quiet and subtle, began to mount as her fingers grazed the skin of his cheek. She had saved his life, but now she was watching him heal in ways she hadn't anticipated. Ways that made her heart race in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Minutes turned into hours, and as the night deepened, Amara continued to care for him, her thoughts lost in the rhythm of her actions. She had always prided herself on her ability to keep emotions at bay, to remain invisible, but as the hours passed and Oluwaseun's breathing steadied, a strange new emotion stirred inside her. The vulnerability between them was undeniable. Here he was, a man who likely never needed to rely on anyone for anything, now lying before her, dependent on her for his very survival. Amara felt an unexpected surge of power. Power in her ability to save him, but also the power of the connection they had unwittingly formed. Just before dawn, as the first rays of light pierced through the cracks in the walls, Oluwaseun stirred. His eyes fluttered open, disoriented and confused. For a moment, he stared at the ceiling, his mind slowly coming back to reality. And then, his gaze shifted to Amara. His voice was a soft rasp, barely audible, but it carried an undeniable weight. Where am I?" Her heart skipped a beat at the sound of his voice. She had seen so much suffering in her life, so much loss and pain. But this was something new, something she hadn't expected. Oluwaseun, the man who was beyond reach, was now the man she had saved. "You're safe," she said quietly, brushing a lock of hair from her face as she met his gaze. "Your car crashed. I pulled you out before it exploded." For a moment, Oluwaseun seemed to struggle with the words, his mind racing to piece together what had happened. But then his eyes focused on her, and there was something in his gaze that made Amara feel both seen and unseen all at once. "My car, it's gone," he murmured, his voice weak, but laced with something she couldn't quite place. "Thank you." His gratitude washed over her like a wave, but it didn't soothe the growing fire she felt within. His fingers brushed against hers as he took the cup of water she offered, the simple contact sending a shock through her. She didn't want to admit it, but she couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward him. It was as though 1,000 unspoken words passed between them in that simple, fleeting moment. "You saved my life," he whispered, his eyes searching hers. "Not everyone would have done what you did." Her breath caught in her throat, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she couldn't find the words to deflect or dismiss. There was no sarcasm, no walls. There was only the raw, palpable truth between them. "I only did what any human should," Amara replied, her voice barely a whisper as she tried to hold back the surge of emotions that threatened to spill over. His eyes never left hers as he finished the last sip from the cup. The silence between them stretched, heavy and thick with tension. Oluwaseun wasn't just a man from a different world. He was a man who had been brought low, the universe seemingly conspiring to place him in her hands. And in that instant, something between them shifted, something she couldn't control. As the night faded and the first light of day spilled into the room, their bond deepened, fueled by the quiet intensity that simmered beneath the surface. She hadn't expected any of this, hadn't expected him, hadn't expected the feelings that had come rushing in, but there was no denying it now. Days passed and the healing began. Oluwaseun's condition slowly improved, and as he grew stronger, so too did the undeniable chemistry between him and Amara. What began as an act of pure survival had transformed into something more, something neither of them had expected. The gap between their worlds seemed to shrink with each passing day, and what once felt like an insurmountable distance now felt like an invitation to something deeper, more intimate. Each moment spent together, tending to his wounds, cooking meals, or simply sitting in silence, became charged with an electric tension. Amara tried to ignore the warmth that spread through her every time Oluwaseun's eyes met hers, or the way his hand would brush against hers when he reached for a drink. She had lived so long in solitude, never allowing herself to feel the touch of another. But now, every glance, every fleeting touch felt like a storm brewing inside her. One evening, after dinner, they sat together on the small porch outside her hut. The sky above them had turned a deep shade of blue, and the first stars of the night had begun to twinkle in the sky. The air was warm and thick, with the smell of jasmine from a nearby garden. The only sounds are the soft rustling of the leaves and the distant croak of frogs. Amara, Oluwaseun's voice broke the silence, low and full of intent. He was looking at her now, not with the gratitude of a man saved, but with something more, something raw, something unspoken. I owe you more than just my life. She shifted uncomfortably, her gaze drifting to the ground. She didn't know how to respond. The weight of his words felt like a burden she wasn't sure she was ready for. You owe me nothing, she replied quickly, trying to keep her voice steady. But there was a slight tremor in it that betrayed her. I did what anyone would do. But Oluwaseun wasn't convinced. He leaned closer, his eyes dark with something that made Amara's pulse quicken. She could feel the heat between them growing, a heat that had nothing to do with the warmth of the night air. Do you really believe that? He asked softly, his voice dipping lower as he closed the distance between them. You pulled me from the fire, Amara. You saved me. You gave me another chance at life. You deserve more than nothing. Amara's heart pounded in her chest, and she couldn't bring herself to look away from his gaze. The intensity was unbearable, and she felt herself drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. She had spent so long protecting herself from the world, but now, with Oluwaseun, all her walls seemed to be crumbling. You don't owe me anything, she repeated, her voice weaker this time. But she wasn't sure she was saying it for him or for herself. She had always kept her emotions tightly controlled, never allowed herself to feel too much, to want too much. She had learned long ago that wanting only led to pain. But now, with him so close, her resolve was beginning to slip. Oluwaseun reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands. His thumb stroked her cheek, and the sensation was like a spark, sending a wave of warmth through her body. I don't know how to explain this, but something about you, Amara, it's like you become a part of me. I can't explain it, but I need to know you feel it too. Her breath caught in her throat. The words she wanted to say for so long, the words she had been too afraid to speak, were on the tip of her tongue. But just as she opened her mouth to speak, Oluwaseun's lips were on hers, silencing her in the most delicious way. It wasn't a kiss that demanded anything, but one that simply asked for surrender. His lips were soft, tender, as if he were testing her, as if he were waiting for her to pull away. But she didn't. Instead, she kissed him back, her hands reaching up to tangle in his hair, pulling him closer, needing the closeness, the heat, the connection. The kiss deepened, growing more intense, more urgent, as if all the emotions they had both kept hidden were being released in that single moment. Amara felt the weight of everything she had been holding on to for so long slip away. The world outside her small hut ceased to exist, and there was only Oluwaseun and the raw, undeniable pull between them. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, Amara couldn't bring herself to look at him. She had spent so long building walls around her heart, but now they were gone, and she was exposed in a way she had never been before. She felt vulnerable, but there was something else, something that felt right. Oluwaseun brushed a lock of hair from her face, his expression soft. You don't have to say anything, he murmured. I just need you to know I feel it too. For the first time in a long while, Amara didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel like the world was passing her by. In that moment, with Oluwaseun so close, she felt seen. She felt alive. The bond between them had shifted, had grown into something more, something neither of them could deny. And as the night deepened around them, Amara knew that what had started as an act of survival had now become a journey of desire, longing, and, most of all, love. The following days passed in a blur, each one blurring into the next as Amara and Oluwaseun settled into a rhythm of their own. The days were spent with her tending to his wounds, preparing food with the limited resources she had, and trying to hold herself together in the face of emotions she wasn't sure she could handle. Oluwaseun, on the other hand, was a man slowly returning to life, both physically and emotionally. As he regained strength, so did the connection between them. It was undeniable now. What started as a simple act of survival had ignited something far deeper. They shared more than just stolen moments now. Every look, every touch, was charged with an intensity that made it impossible to ignore the chemistry between them. The fire that had once raged inside the car had not only threatened to destroy them, but it sparked a flame that was beginning to consume them both. One evening, as Amara worked over the fire, preparing a small meal for them both, she couldn't help but notice how Oluwaseun seemed to watch her in silence. His eyes, dark with something unreadable, followed her movements intently, but he said nothing. His gaze wasn't just admiration. It was something more profound, as though he was studying her, learning her, wanting to understand her in a way he never had before. She avoided his gaze as best as she could, but the heat between them was palpable. The simple act of preparing food, something she had done countless times before without thinking, now felt loaded with meaning. There was a quiet tension, an unspoken invitation that hung in the air, pulling them closer without either of them saying a word. Amara, his voice broke through the silence, and her heart skipped in response. His tone was hushed, intimate, filled with an emotion she wasn't quite ready to name. What happens now? The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of what it implied. Oluwaseun wasn't asking about their survival. He wasn't asking if she'd taken care of him, if he was alive. No, he was asking about them, about what this was between them, what it meant, where it was headed. And Amara, in all her years of self-protection, of building walls and hiding from the world, had no answer for him. Instead, she lowered her gaze, hand shaking slightly as she stirred the pot over fire. Her emotions were a jumbled mess now, tangled up in longing and fear. She hadn't been prepared for this. Not this connection, not this man. It was easier to ignore the growing ache inside her, to bury her feelings beneath the weight of practical concerns, of daily survival. But the truth was, the more time she spent with Oluwaseun, the more impossible it became to pretend she didn't want him. "I don't know," she finally admitted, her voice barely a whisper, as though she were admitting it to herself as much as to him. "I never thought I'd get this far. I never thought I'd care." Oluwaseun didn't reply immediately. He took a step closer to her, his movements deliberate, slow. She could feel his presence behind her, the warmth of his body almost electric. The tension was so thick now, it felt as though they were both standing on the edge of something they couldn't control. Then, without warning, he reached for her hand, gently pulling her to face him. There was a softness to his touch, a gentleness that surprised her. He wasn't in a rush, not demanding anything of her. He was simply there, standing before her with a quiet understanding in his eyes. The uncertainty in her gaze didn't deter him. If anything, it seemed to encourage him, draw him closer. "Amara," he said again, his voice low, soothing. "You've already given me more than I could ever ask for. But I need to know, do you feel this too? Do you feel what's happened between us?" Her heart raced as she looked into his eyes, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the fire. The tenderness in his expression cut through her defenses, leaving her exposed in a way she had never been before. She couldn't deny it any longer. She felt it. The pull, the chemistry, the connection that had been building between them from the moment their worlds collided. She nodded, unable to speak, and before she could think, Oluwaseun leaned in. capturing her lips with his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as though he was waiting for her to pull away, to stop him, but she didn't. Instead, she kissed him back, her lips parting in response, a surge of desire coursing through her veins. The floodgates opened, and the emotion she had tried so hard to suppress came rushing to the surface. As the kiss deepened, the world outside seemed to fade away. There was no fire, no crash, no future. There was only Ayuwazian and the sensation of his lips moving against hers. The storm that had raged between them for days now found its release, not in words, but in the intensity of their connection. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathless, Amara looked into his eyes, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never felt so alive, so wanted, and yet there was still fear of the unknown, fear of the consequences. "I don't know what this is," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly, "but I know I don't want it to end." Ayuwazian smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then don't let it. Don't let it end." And just like that, Amara knew this wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was a beginning of something much more, something she hadn't dared to hope for, a love that, despite their differences, would defy every obstacle, every expectation. The days that followed were like a dream, or perhaps a feverish fantasy. Every time Amara and Ayuwazian crossed paths, there was an undeniable pull, an intimacy between them that neither of them could ignore. Every shared glance, every soft touch, seemed to deepen their connection in ways that neither of them had anticipated. Ayuwazian, once a man trapped in the gilded cage of his own making, now seemed to live in a world where only Amara mattered. And for the first time in years, she was seen, truly seen, not as a homeless woman, but as a woman worthy of love and affection. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dirt path that led to the village, Amara found herself alone in the garden, picking herbs for their next meal. Her mind, once preoccupied with survival, now drifted to thoughts of Ayuwazian, his presence in her life, the way his hands had felt against her skin, the warmth of his lips against hers. The intimacy they had shared in the past days lingered in her body, a constant reminder of the emotions she was trying to process. She had always prided herself on being invisible, on not needing anyone. But now, with Ayuwazian, everything felt different. He made her feel alive in ways she hadn't imagined. The touch of his hand, the way he looked at her as though she was everything he needed, had made her feel powerful. She had always feared intimacy, fearing it would lead to pain, but now she longed for more. She longed to explore the depths of the passion they had only just begun to awaken. As she gathered the herbs, she felt a familiar presence behind her. Without turning, she already knew it was him. Ayuwazian had a way of moving, silently yet with purpose. He didn't speak at first, just watched her, his gaze warm, intense. "Amara," he finally said, his voice low and filled with the same desire she felt ever since their first kiss. "I think about you, about us, all the time." Her heart skipped a beat as she slowly turned to face him. Ayuwazian was standing just a few feet away, his body tense with a mixture of longing and restraint. The look in his eyes was enough to make her pulse race, to ignite that same spark of desire that had been growing between them since the moment they met. "You think about us?" Amara repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. It felt surreal, hearing him speak the very words she had been afraid to say out loud. She had wanted this, had craved this kind of connection, but the weight of it, the rawness of the emotions it stirred, made her feel vulnerable in a way she hadn't expected. He stepped closer, his fingers brushing the back of her hand, sending a shiver through her. "I can't stop thinking about you," he confessed. "There's something about you, something I can't explain. You've become more than just a woman who saved me. You're my thoughts in my heart. And He paused, his breath catching as if the words were too heavy to speak. "I want to know you, Amara. I want to be with you. Not just because you saved me, but because of the woman you are." Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment she couldn't speak. The sincerity in his eyes, the vulnerability in his voice, was more than she had ever expected. She had been alone for so long, buried under the weight of her past. But with him, it felt as if everything was possible. Before she could respond, Alyawazian closed the distance between them, his lips pressing against hers in a kiss that was soft at first, almost tentative. But soon the heat between them grew, and their kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more desperate. Amara felt her body respond to him, the desire she had buried for so long surging to the surface. She didn't fight it. She couldn't. The passion between them burned like a wildfire, consuming everything in its path. His hands cupped her face, pulling her closer, while hers tangled in his hair, desperately drawing him in. The kiss was no longer just an act of affection. It was an expression of everything they had both kept hidden. It was Amara's surrender to the emotion she had never allowed herself to feel, and Alyawazian's declaration that he wanted her, wanted all of her. They pulled away, breathless, their foreheads resting together as they shared the same unspoken realization. There was no going back from this. The connection they had shared, the intimacy they had begun to explore, was real, undeniable. "Amara," Alyawazian whispered, his voice husky with emotion, "I need you." And in that moment, she understood. She understood what it meant to truly want someone, to crave not just their body, but their soul, their heart. She had never allowed herself to feel this way, to give herself so fully to another person, but with him, it felt natural, inevitable, without a word. She took his hand and led him back to the hut, the weight of their shared desire pressing them forward. The night would be theirs, a night of discovery, of intimacy, of surrender. As they came together, their bodies entwined, the world outside disappeared. There was only the two of them, lost in the intensity of the moment, the deep connection that bound them. Amara let go of her fears, her doubts, and allowed herself to be consumed by the love, the passion, that Alyawazian offered. She had never felt anything like this before. The depth of his touch, the tenderness of his kiss, the way he held her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And for the first time, Amara felt truly alive. The days that followed were filled with a quiet intensity. Amara and Alyawazian seemed to exist in a world of their own, where the outside world no longer mattered. Every glance they exchanged, every touch, felt like a promise of something more, something deeper. Their relationship had become an unspoken dance, one where the lines between passion and intimacy blurred, where each moment was filled with unspoken words and lingering glances. The air between them had shifted. The chemistry they had once denied was now impossible to ignore. There was a rawness to the way Alyawazian looked at her, an intensity that made her heart race, that made her body ache for him. He didn't just see her as the woman who had saved him. He saw her for everything she was, strong, vulnerable, and beautiful in a way that she had never allowed herself to believe. One afternoon, as the sun beat down on the village, they found themselves alone again, sitting on the small porch of her hut. The warmth of the day was a contrast to the coolness that lingered between them, a coolness that had been there ever since that first kiss. The emotions that had begun to simmer beneath the surface now threatened to boil over. Alyawazian reached for her hand, his fingers tracing the lines of her palm with a tenderness that took her breath away. "Amara," he said, his voice low and filled with something she couldn't quite name. "What happens after this? After us?" She turned her face away for a moment, trying to gather her thoughts. The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of everything they had become. She had never allowed herself to imagine a future beyond survival. She had lived for so long in the present, in the now, that the idea of something more, a future with him, felt both exhilarating and terrifying. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice soft, unsure. "I've never really thought about the future. I've only ever thought about today, about getting by." Aluwazian squeezed her hand, his grip firm, grounding her. "Then let's think about tomorrow," he said, his voice filled with determination. "Let's think about what we want, about what we can have." Her heart skipped a beat. Aluwazian had always been a man of power and privilege, someone who had always been in control of his life, his destiny. But here, with her, he was different. He was no longer the billionaire who controlled the world with a flick of his finger. He was just a man, vulnerable and raw, looking for something real, looking for her. The thought of him wanting something from her, wanting her in a way that went beyond the physical, beyond the passion, left her speechless. She had never allowed herself to believe that someone like him, someone with everything, could want someone like her, someone who had nothing but her heart and her hands. But here he was, asking her to take a chance on him, asking her to believe that they could have something beyond the brief moments they had shared. And for the first time in her life, Amara allowed herself to dream. "Maybe," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "maybe we can have something. Maybe we can make something of this." Aluwazian smiled, the warmth in his eyes sending a flutter through her chest. "We already have something, Amara, something real." He leaned in then, his lips brushing against hers once more. But this time, the kiss was slow, deliberate, full of promises that neither of them were ready to speak aloud. It was a kiss that spoke of more than just physical desire. It spoke of the unspoken bond that had formed between them, the trust that had been built in the quiet moments they had shared. As they pulled away, Aluwazian placed his forehead against hers, his breath mingling with hers in the shared silence. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was no need for words. The connection they had was deeper than that. "What are we doing, Aluwazian?" Amara finally asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. "What does this mean for us?" His eyes locked onto hers, and he smiled softly, his thumb gently caressing her cheek. "It means we're finding each other. It means we're not alone anymore." And in that moment, Amara realized that she hadn't just saved his life that night. She had saved herself too. She had given herself a chance to feel love, to feel seen, to feel wanted. And no matter what happened next, she knew that this was worth everything. The risk, the vulnerability, the uncertainty. But Aluwazian wasn't finished. He took a deep breath and then, as if gathering all his courage, he said the words that had been lingering between them for days. "I don't want to leave," he said, his voice firm and filled with an emotion that caught her off guard. "I want to stay with you. Amara, I want to build something with you." Her heart swelled at his words. She had never imagined this. The life they could have together, it seemed impossible, but somehow with him, it felt right. She had spent so many years hiding from the world, burying herself in survival, in the notion that she was not worthy of love. But with him, she felt everything she had been missing. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," Amara said softly, her fingers tracing the lines of his jaw. "But I know that right now, in this moment, I want to be with you." And as the sun dipped below the horizon once more, Amara and Aluwazian shared a kiss that sealed their unspoken promises, a kiss that would mark the beginning of a new chapter in both their lives, one filled with love, passion, and the courage to face whatever the future held. The days that followed were a blur of stolen moments and whispered promises. Amara and Aluwazian had found something rare and fragile in each other, something neither of them had expected. Amara, who had spent so long living in the shadows, learning to be invisible to the world, now found herself seen, truly seen. And Aluwazian, once confined by his wealth and status, had found a part of himself he hadn't known he was missing, a connection that went beyond material success, beyond the life he had known. They spent their days together, walking the narrow, winding paths of the village, talking about everything and nothing at all. They shared stories of their past, Amara's painful memories of abandonment, her struggle to survive, and the empty night spent wondering if love was ever meant for someone like her. Oluwaseun, in turn, shared the loneliness he had felt despite his wealth, the emptiness that had consumed him despite his many achievements. As the sun set each night, they would sit together on the porch of her hut, the warm evening breeze gently blowing through the trees, and the sky above them turning shades of pink and purple. The world around them seemed to fade away in those moments, leaving only the two of them, caught in the magic of what was unfolding between them. But as their connection deepened, so did the complexities of their relationship. Oluwaseun had always been a man accustomed to getting what he wanted, and he had no intention of letting Amara slip away. Yet, Amara was more guarded than he had imagined, her past scars making her hesitant to fully surrender to the love that was growing between them. She had been let down too many times, and her heart, though full of longing, was reluctant to trust again. One evening, after dinner, they sat together on the porch as usual, but tonight there was a heaviness in the air. The silence between them was charged, filled with unspoken words and emotions that neither of them were sure how to express. Oluwaseun turned to face her, his gaze intense, his expression unreadable. "Amara," he began, his voice soft but filled with purpose, "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything we've shared, and where it's going." Her heart skipped a beat as she met his gaze. She had been trying to ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind, the one that told her she couldn't have this, couldn't have him. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw the same depth of emotion reflected there. He wasn't just in this for the passion or the physical connection. He wanted her. He wanted everything. "I don't want to rush you," Oluwaseun continued, his voice softening, "but I can't help but think that we're meant to be more than this. I want us to build something together, something real. I want to be with you, Amara, not just for today or for a few nights, but for the future." Amara felt a lump form in her throat, a mixture of fear and longing flooding her chest. She had never been asked for this kind of commitment before, not from anyone who had truly meant it. She had spent so long pretending she didn't need anything, hiding her heart away from the world, that the idea of opening up, of trusting someone so fully, terrified her. "I've never had anything real, Oluwaseun," she said, her voice trembling. "I've never been given a chance to believe in love, to believe in anything more than survival." He reached out, cupping her face gently in his hands. "You don't have to believe in love the way you've been taught. We'll figure out together. But what I know is that I can't imagine my life without you in it." The intensity of his words hit her like a wave, and for the first time, she felt a tear slip from the corner of her eye. She wasn't sure what it meant to trust someone like this, to open herself up completely, but she knew that she couldn't keep running. Not from him, and not from herself. "I don't know if I can trust you, Oluwaseun," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I want to try. I want to believe in this." And with those words, they both knew something had shifted, something profound and irreversible. Amara wasn't just surrendering to Oluwaseun's love. She was surrendering to the idea that she was worthy of it. She was learning to trust, to let go, and in doing so, she allowed herself to feel something she had long denied: love, in all its forms, raw and unfiltered. The days that followed were filled with laughter, with touches that lingered a little longer than they should, with conversations that delved deeper into their fears, their desires, and their hopes for the future. The more Amara opened up, the more Oluwaseun became everything she needed: her protector, her confidant, and her lover. One evening, after an intimate dinner by the fire, the warmth between them felt different, more intense. Oluwaseun stood behind her as she washed the dishes, his body close to hers, his breath warm on her neck. "Amara," he whispered, his voice thick with desire, "I need you. I need to show you how much I care, how much I've fallen for you." Before she could respond, he gently turned her around, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that was slow, deliberate, and full of longing. Every part of her responded to him, her heart, her body, her soul, and she knew without a doubt that this was more than passion. This was the culmination of everything they had shared, their pain, their joy, their vulnerabilities. And now, in the quiet of the night, it was all coming together. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more desperate, as though they both knew that this was a moment of reckoning. She had spent so long building walls around her heart, but now, with him, those walls were falling away, piece by piece. There was no more room for fear, no more room for doubt. Just them, just this. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and trembling, Amara looked into Oyuwazian's eyes and saw something she had never seen before, a future that was hers to shape, with him by her side. "I'm yours," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I've always been yours." And as the night settled around them, Oyuwazian smiled, his heart full, knowing that in this small hut, in this little corner of the world, they found something worth more than anything money could buy. The days that followed were filled with a sense of quiet contentment, the kind that made Amara feel as though time had slowed down, as though she and Oyuwazian existed in a world that belonged only to them. Every shared glance, every touch, was a promise, an unspoken vow of what was to come. They had both found something in each other that transcended their differences, something that didn't need to be explained but only felt. Oyuwazian, despite his wealth and status, had found a new sense of freedom in Amara's arms. She had opened up a part of him that he had long kept hidden, a tenderness, a vulnerability, and in return he had become her anchor, the one who made her feel worthy, the one who showed her that love wasn't just something to be feared, but something to be embraced. The walls Amara had spent years building around her heart were now crumbling, piece by piece, until she stood before him, bare and open, in a way she had never been with anyone else. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the village, Oyuwazian surprised her with a picnic. They sat together on a soft blanket spread out on the grass, the softness of the world around them blending into the quiet rhythm of their hearts. Amara smiled at him, her fingers brushing his as they shared a meal of roasted vegetables and bread, the simplicity of it all grounding her in a way she hadn't expected. "I never imagined this," she said softly, her eyes meeting his. "I never thought I'd find someone like you." Oyuwazian chuckled, his gaze never leaving hers. "I never imagined I'd find someone like you either, but I'm glad I did." They spent hours there, talking about everything and nothing, their connection deepening with every word, every shared laugh. But there was something else, something unspoken between them, that neither of them could ignore. The desire that had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks had finally reached its breaking point. The chemistry was undeniable, and the pull between them was irresistible. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Oyuwazian reached out, gently cupping Amara's face in his hands. His touch was soft, almost reverent, as though he were afraid she might slip away. "Amara," he whispered, his voice low and filled with longing, "I want to make love to you. I've wanted you since the moment I laid eyes on you." Her heart raced as he spoke the words she had been both longing to hear and dreading to acknowledge. She had wanted him too, in every way. But a part of her was afraid of what it meant to give herself fully, to trust someone so completely. "I've never been with anyone like this before," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I've always been afraid of what it might mean, of what it might do to me." Oyuwazian smiled softly, his thumb brushing her cheek. "You don't have to be afraid. Amara, what we have is real. It's not just about the physical. It's about us, about the love we share." She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She had spent so long pushing away the idea of love, the idea of being vulnerable. But now with Oluwaseun, it felt like the safest thing in the world. The thought of giving herself to him, of sharing everything, her heart, her body, her soul, didn't scare her. It felt right. As if sensing her hesitation, Oluwaseun leaned forward, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that was soft, tentative, as though asking for permission. Amara responded immediately, her arms wrapping around him as she pulled him closer, deepening the kiss. The world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, caught in the heat of the moment. The kiss became more urgent, more passionate, as though everything they'd held back, everything they'd kept hidden, was now pouring out between them. Oluwaseun gently laid her down on the blanket, his body hovering over hers, his hands tracing the contours of her body with a reverence that made her pulse quicken. Every touch was tender, deliberate, as though he were learning her, savoring her in ways that words could never describe. Their clothes fell away in a haze of desire, the air around them thick with anticipation. Amara felt the weight of his body pressing down on hers, the heat of his skin igniting every nerve in her body. She had never felt anything like this before. The connection, the longing, the need that surged through her. When he finally entered her, it was with a slow, deliberate movement, as though he wanted to savor every moment, every sensation. Amara gasped at the feeling, her body responding to him instinctively. There was no rush, no urgency. It was a moment of pure connection, of giving and receiving, of becoming one in a way that was both physical and emotional. Their lovemaking was slow, tender, filled with the kind of intimacy that only deepens over time. It wasn't just about pleasure. It was about trust, about the emotional bond that had been building between them. They explored each other, their bodies entwined in a dance that was both sensual and healing. Oluwaseun whispered her name over and over, as though committing her to memory, as though she was the only thing that mattered in that moment. As they finally reached the peak of their passion, Amara felt a release, not just physically, but emotionally as well. She had let go of her fears, her doubts, and in doing so, she had allowed herself to be loved completely, without hesitation. The warmth of his embrace, the tenderness of his touch, was everything she had longed for, and more. They lay together in the quiet of the night, their bodies still tangled, their breathing slowly returning to normal. Amara rested her head on Oluwaseun's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling the weight of the world lift off her shoulders. "I love you," he whispered, his fingers tracing circles on her back. "I don't ever want to let you go." Her heart swelled at his words, and for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe them. She had never known love like this, unconditional, raw, and real. "I love you too," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I could love anyone again, but with you, it feels like I can." And in that moment, as the night wrapped around them like a warm embrace, Amara and Oluwaseun knew that what they shared was more than just a fleeting connection. It was love, real, unspoken, and undeniable, and it was theirs to hold on to no matter what the future held. In the days that followed, Amara and Oluwaseun found a rhythm in their relationship that felt both natural and exhilarating. It was as though they were no longer two people from completely different worlds. With each passing day, they wove their lives together, intertwined in a way that felt destined, as though fate itself had brought them to this moment. Oluwaseun, once the man who had everything but nothing at the same time, now found himself fulfilled in ways he hadn't known he could be. And Amara, who had lived in the shadows for so long, now felt like she was basking in the light. Their connection had evolved beyond physical attraction, beyond the emotional depths they had explored together. It was something deeper, something that transcended all the labels the world might try to place on them. It was love in its purest form, raw and unfiltered, unapologetically intense. Amara no longer feared it. She welcomed it, allowed it to wrap around her like a warm embrace. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and purple, they found themselves sitting together by the edge of the forest, the soft rustle of the leaves providing the only sound. The air was warm, and a gentle breeze blew across them, carrying the fragrance of wildflowers. Alyawazian took Amara's hand in his thumb tracing the lines of her palm as he looked at her, his gaze soft yet filled with intensity that made her heart skip a beat. "Amara," he began, his voice low and full of emotion, "what we have, it's everything I never thought I needed, everything I never thought I deserved." She turned her face toward him, meeting his gaze with a mixture of wonder and vulnerability. "I never thought I would find this," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "I never thought anyone could see me, could love me the way you do." His hand gently cupped her face, his thumb brushing over her lips as he leaned in, his breath mingling with hers. "I see you, Amara. I see everything you are, everything you've been, and I love you for it. All of it." And in that moment, as they kissed once again, the world seemed to fade away. The stars above them blinked softly, as if in agreement. There was no more uncertainty between them, no more fear of rejection or hesitation. What had once been two souls, divided by their circumstances, now felt whole together, bound by something deeper than physical connection. It was love, raw and unbreakable. The night that followed was filled with quiet intimacy, each moment deeper than the last. Every touch, every kiss, was a promise, one they both understood and cherished. Amara, once a woman who had resigned herself to the pain of a lonely existence, now found herself enveloped in the warmth of love, the kind of love she had never dared to hope for. Alyawazian, a man who had built his empire on the backs of others, now found himself in the arms of the one person who had taught him the true meaning of strength, vulnerability, and surrender. As they came together again, their bodies moving in sync, the passion they shared was unlike anything either of them had ever experienced. It wasn't just about pleasure. It was about connection, about surrendering to each other completely. Every caress, every movement was a reflection of the depth of their bond. And in those moments, they were not just lovers. They were soulmates, perfectly aligned in a way that felt destined. The next morning, they woke in each other's arms, the warmth of their shared intimacy still lingering between them. Amara lay with her head resting on Alyawazian's chest, her fingers tracing the contours of skin as she listened to the steady beat of his heart. "We've made it, haven't we?" she whispered, her voice filled with quiet awe. Alyawazian smiled down at her, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "We have, Amara, and there's nothing I want more than to spend every moment with you." Their love, once an impossible dream, was now their reality. They had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. Two people from different worlds, different lives, brought together by fate, by chance, and by the undeniable connection they shared. And in the quiet of that moment, as the sun rose over the horizon, they knew that they would face whatever the future held together. There was no more fear, no more doubt. It was just them, Amara and Alyawazian, and the life they had built, a life full of love, trust, and a promise to never let go.